Hey everyone, JagTagger93 here with another Doom WOD review. This one is called Crimson Wood by YugiBoy85. Now this map looks very good. I really love the aesthetic to it. The boards and blood aesthetic works really well. Everything is paneled and drawn very neatly with definite care. Tiles and textures from the decorative skulls to the candles are all drawn in symmetry and pattern in mind. Terrific. I also love how a lot of portions of the map will have candles placed with a deliberate purpose of guiding the player. Unfortunately, that's about as far as this map's player psychology goes. More on that in a little bit. Talking about aesthetics, though, the architecture here is very good. It's symmetrical, it's complicated, but not so complicated as one could get lost easily. So I love that. I love the depth in it. A lot of different floors. Granted, it's kind of lacks much logic, so that kind of hurts the immersion. However, it's not so complex as you can get lost in it. So, not once did I ever get lost in this map. It's very intuitively designed, actually. So, good stuff. Functionality is good as well. The author in the README files said they were working to make sure they cleaned up all the slime trails, and I didn't notice any at all when I was playing. The only technical gaffe that I noticed was at one part of the map, there's a switch panel that blocks the player's path. Now if you press the switch, the panel will lower and ahead some pillars will lift up. And this also triggers a revenant to spawn in as well. However, the panel that's blocking you, it doesn't completely block you. You can easily walk right past it. In fact, you very likely would if you're not paying attention. And that leaves you to fall down and then have to try to get back up to where that panel was so you can progress with the map. So kind of an annoying little thing. Not too major. So far, aesthetically and functionally, it's a solid map. However, like I said, this map does lack some player psychology features. The gameplay overall is not very good, or at least it's not my style. So there's a large emphasis on enemies spawning into the room, which is a pet peeve of mine. I prefer the most of the enemies to be naturally placed within the environment, so it looks like they're moving throughout it, as if it's actually, go for some sort of realistic aesthetic here, instead of just going room to room and having a bunch of monsters spawn in again and again and again. You can have your monster closets, and they can work to set up traps, especially when there's a sense of build to it. Here, there really wasn't, actually. Monsters would just spawn in, and they would spawn in at very awkward angles, too, so yeah, it was really annoying, and the ones that were placed in the environment were usually in very cheap areas. They were behind textures, they were in nooks and crannies that you were very likely going to walk right by and get shot to the head. Or they were placed in very dark areas. So a lot of times I would just be shooting into little dark gaps in the walls, and just making sure that nothing's behind there. Usually there was, though, like a chain gunner. Combat is very infuriating in this map as well. There's a lot of areas where it's very dark. The lighting is very inconsistently placed. It's consistent in that when there's a blood texture or lava texture, there'll be lighting there. However, in some areas, though, some parts will be lit, some parts will just be pitch black without any rhyme or reason. And it's really annoying being in a small room that's filling up with enemies that are just spawning in, so you couldn't plan beforehand. And yes, there's plenty of ammo, but most of the ammo you get, especially early on, are rockets. So yeah, you're in a small room, which very likely will have pillars in the way as well. Enemies spawning in, and you got a bunch of rockets. You're going to die a lot. Now, the README file says veteran players will have very little difficulty completing this one. Bullshit. I've been playing this game for really since vanilla. A lot of players have, and you will die a lot in this map. It took me about an hour to complete, and I died quite a bit, not to other enemies, but to just as I'm running and gunning, running low on ammunition, being down to my rockets, and going splat. Pain in the ass. That being said, I did enjoy the very last big fight, actually. For one thing, you can actually see what's going on. That's awesome. There's a sense of build-up to it as well. You come to an area where there's a bunch of items, so you know something's going to happen, and there's a blue skull on an altar. You grab the blue skull key, and of course it triggers the last encounter, and enemies start, of course, spawning in waves. What makes this satisfying, though, is as the enemies are spawning in, every now and then an item will appear as well, be it a blue armor or a soul sphere. And what was really cool was the last enemy to spawn in was a cyber demon, and that actually was a huge help. I've never been so happy to see a cyber demon before. So at this point in the fight, the room is filling up more and more with cacodemons and other nasties, and I'm running low on ammunition, of course, and I've gotten my ass kicked again and again throughout this map because I was running low on ammunition and enemies just keep piling in. So I have no faith in the map right now to do anything intelligent with regards to enemy progression. And then boom, in comes a cyber demon, and that was awesome. So naturally what you want to do is keep your distance from the cyber demon, let the cyber demon try and attack you. Of course the cyber demon will be firing its rockets and accidentally hitting the cacodemons, triggering some much needed room clearing monster fighting. That was awesome. I really liked that. Besides that though, again, there was no sense of progression to this map. Each big monster encounter was about as infuriating to complete or as hard to complete as the last, and again a lot of it was due to just cheapness. Monsters spawning in behind you, monsters spawning in at different angles, new monsters coming in, ones that you can't really prepare for, lack of functional ammunition. You don't really get a plasma rifle until about midway through the map. If there is a BFG, I don't know where it is. I didn't get all the secrets, I admit that. But the BFG, I think, is a necessity for well, maybe not actually. I did it without the BFG, but it was a pain in the ass. Your plasma rifle ammunition goes very, very quickly, by the way, and you're never given enough of it. So yeah, that's really all I have to say about the monster fighting. I just really hate having to deal with waves and waves of monsters spawning in again and again and again into a small room. No sense of progression there, other than something bad's going to happen when I go in this room. That's it. It wouldn't be so bad though if I can actually see what's going on. I kept playing with the brightness and gamma settings, and it just would not make any difference at all whatsoever. So a lot of the areas were just needlessly dark. Now, I'm complaining a lot about the monster fight, or the the fights in the dark pits and whatnot. It is beatable. It is playable. Again, it took me about an hour to complete on Ultraviolence, but most of that hour was me cursing and very much trial and error gameplay. You can't really prepare for what's going to happen ahead of time if there's nothing there until you actually go into the room. Stuff spawns in, or a wall opens, and there's a pitch black corridor full of chain gunners, and then you get perforated full of bullets. And yeah, thinking on your feet is very hard because again, a lot of the encounters, a lot of the fighting happens in very dark areas. So if the lighting was fixed a little bit, it'd be much more bearable, I think. The progression isn't really there, like I said. Again, you spend most of the map going from dark pit to dark pit. Dying and reloading, again and again. So yeah, to wrap up, Crimson Wood looks really great. It's built really well, and again, I really liked that big final fight actually. But the gameplay up until then is a complete slog, full of fights with barely visible environments. There's also an overabundance, I think, of monster closets being used, and a real lack of good ammunition for much of the map. Again, except rockets. And it's a real chore to play through when you're only down to rockets, dark environments, arch vials, and other stuff constantly spawning into a very, very small, cramped room. Very hard to think on your feet too, and infuriating when you got stuff just constantly coming in, and you're not given the tools to deal with it very easily. So you die, you play, start again, die, start again. Eventually you learn what enemies are coming and when, and then you're able to plan. And yeah. In any event, I give this one a 4 out of 10. Technically, it's great. Looks great. Plays so-so. Alright. And that is it. Thank you all for watching. This is JagTagger93 signing out. Have a good one.